I'm opening. We have an eye, sort of a nostril, 2 teeth. One of the teeth has a small cavity. Close call, folks, but I think we got here just in time.
Presented by Maria Menounos and Kevin Undergaro. This is Anatomy of a Movie. In-depth discussions and breakdowns of various movie titles. And now that you've seen the movie, let the dissection begin.
All right, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us for another Anatomy of a Movie. This week's dissection is Whiplash. I'm John Comerford. I'm joined in the studio by Josh Richmond.
Hello there. I can't believe they let me on a microphone.
And Sara Stretton.
Hello again.
And Demetri, Panos.
Hello, movie fans.
All right, as always, we're going to jump right in. Let's talk about our overall impressions. Did Whiplash hit the right notes? Did it fall flat? Let's go to our resident lady of the
Yes, ladies first.
I get to start?
Yes.
All right. What I have to say about this film is that, one, I had no idea what I was going in for. I did not know what this movie was about. I just heard about it by word of mouth and by everyone telling me I needed to see it. So I will say that I think it was a very well-made movie. I liked the story they told and the relationship they built. I need to preface this with saying, like, not all good movies, like, need to make you happy. This was a good movie that did not make me happy. It made me very anxious throughout the entire time.
But that's the point, right? It's supposed to make you anxious. That makes it an effective movie.
I was reliving my past. Not that I've had anything to this much of an extreme, but literally almost in the fetal position multiple times. I thought the music was fantastic, but still dealing with the anxiety that it's created.
I mean, personally, for me, it definitely lands right now. As of right now, it's in my top 3 for the year. I really love this movie. Some certain things that we'll get into later on, and you know, and talking various plot points and such. I liken this movie to a really well done, tense sports movie or an action movie. The way that the music was filmed in this, and it's jazz, which is highly, like, it's unlike rock and roll, and the beats countermand everything and what's going on. So it was great. I mean, I love music. You all know me as a soundtrack guy. I love a lot of music, including jazz. It was fantastic. I did feel anxious. I've had, not through learning experience, I've had bosses that have been as torturous.
Megalomaniacs?
I'm going
to say torturous.
Torturous, okay.
So there were certain parts that I knew coming up that, like when he was being nice to him, and I was like, oh, no, that's not going to, like, don't buy into that. But in any case, like I said, I love the performances. J.K. Simmons was fantastic. A lot has been said about J.K. Simmons, deservedly so. Not enough, in my opinion, not enough has been being said about Miles Teller. Miles Teller, I think, is one of our future great actors. He really poured literally his blood, sweat, and tears into this movie. I loved what he did. I thought he was amazing. The direction was fantastic. And all in all, like, it was cathartic. I clapped. I was anxious. I was on the edge of my seat, like a good action movie. And I credit that. Like my friend Peter Block had said, it was filmed like it. Even the way that it was edited, which I've never seen music, and jazz lends itself so easily to this kind of editing.
Well, Damien Chazelle, the director, said that he intended to kind of film a music film like a sports film. So that was definitely his intention, to build to that, rousing showdown and climax. Absolutely. But I think what's interesting, too, is how well this works almost like a love story. Not a traditional love story, but you see these two figures really just circling around each other. And the reason Teller's performance...
I didn't look at it as a love story, but definitely a boxer for sure.
You start with that initial meeting, and then you see Fletcher show up outside of Naaman's classroom, and you see Naaman show up outside of Fletcher's classroom, and they're circling each other like sharks.
Yeah.
And the reason Teller's
Sharks is not a love story.
Well, wait a minute. We all have our different versions. Let Josh have his.
But I think the reason
Jaws, a love story.
I think the reason Teller's performance is so magnificent, and you're right, it hasn't gotten nearly enough praise, is because he's matching Simmons just in terms of sheer intensity.
Oh, absolutely. But I look at this more as a battered wife love story. But it was, very intense. And you're right. I mean, and again, J.K. Simmons, he's the State Farm guy. Fantastic character actor. No, but
he's always been,
but he's always been a character actor. I think this totally elevates him. In all the interviews, he's just fantastic. Seems like I would love for him to be sitting on the couch. Miles Teller as well. And you're right, Miles Teller was able to stand toe-to-toe with an intense performance as J.K. Simmons put in. That's why I think Miles Teller not getting enough credit, because the acting could have been too weak on that side and he would have fallen through. So, but John, we haven't heard...
well, I thought the music was amazing, and I as anybody who's listened to these will tell you, as soon as we talk about music, I usually tend to stop talking because I don't know music very well and I don't have the right articulation to speak on it wisely. So, but that being said, I'm not only not a music aficionado, I'm not even a jazz enthusiast, but this made me, because I just love the music in it, and I so wish the movie was as good as the music, because for me it was not.
Interesting.
And it seemed very one note in its relationship between the two. So, for those reasons, I was wishing that it was more than it was.
I don't know. You say one note, I say focused. Just incredibly focused on this central relationship and how it affects both of these characters. I appreciated that for what it was.
I'm glad you two are sitting on the same side of the table today, because I just feel like it's going to be like bickering over there, but good bickering.
Well, no, and when we get into it, I'm really curious because, for me, there was a little. We'll talk the ending. The ending, there has been much debate about the ending, and J.K. Simmons has even mentioned that. We
just learned that our very special guests are on the line, so why don't we cut into them right now? We have Ben Wilkins and Craig Mann. Hello, how are you? Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
So where can we start? Ben,
Craig, all right, just by voice, let me introduce and then say hello so that audience can get to know your voice. Craig Mann, this is Demetri. Hello, and thanks for being on Anatomy of a Movie.
Thank you.
And Mr. Wilkins, you and I go way, way back to like 3 months ago.
Yes, we do.
How are you, my friend?
I'm well, thank you.
Sound editor extraordinaire. So, again, thank you, gentlemen, for being on the show, and again, for our audience. We have Craig Mann, who is, correct me if I'm wrong, you were the music mixer on this particular production?
Music and dialogue, yes, sir.
Music and dialogue,
wow.
Fantastic.
Wow. You did such a fantastic job, I have to say.
Yeah, and Ben, you were working that soundboard, like I've seen you work. You were sound editor and sound recording or sound mixing as well.
Yeah, sound editor and sound mixer. I just did everything that Craig didn't do.
All right, well, we know that we have a limited time with you, and we're very excited. So I'm just going to jump into questions, and please answer with your own experience on this. First question: This movie is predicated by jazz. Okay, so for sound and editing and the way that it was cut. First, as the music and the dialogue goes, what was the challenges for you, Craig, and how did this all come to you? And then, when you had to piece this together, what were your challenges in doing this movie?
This came to us by way of Blumhouse, who's a client of mine that I do a lot of stuff for, and so I knew this was in development for a while, and they wanted me to do it, and of course, a big music film, any sound guy's dream, so we're eager to get on it.
And go ahead. Sorry.
Go ahead.
No, so we should also Blumhouse is normally known for their horror movies. So to see Blumhouse on an independent film like this, I was like, good for them. This is great. So
a different kind of horror movie.
Yeah, a different kind of horror movie. So, but in doing this, was there anything different with Whiplash and difficulties in matching whatever the sound is, and especially for the drum solos? It's been said that final Caravan drum solo, and even though that Miles Teller was able to play the drums on his own, they still pre-vis this out apparently, and they pre-recorded this drum solo.
Right, because you're not hearing his drumming, right? It's a similar drum solo that very closely matches it.
So how difficult was there a challenge in getting that to look and sound right in the movie?
Did we lose you? Hello?
Ben, are you there?
Craig?
We shocked them into silence.
All right, let's see what we can do about getting them
Technical
back on the
difficulties,
line.
ladies and gentlemen.
Let me apologize. We'll work on that and see if we can get them back.
Lost. Yeah, I just got a text. Lost you. Yes.
Yeah.
So we're calling you back right now.
Mm-hmm.
In any case, but
because what I'm most interested in, because these guys are obviously music guys through and through, what I want to know is if their approach is different, because this is a movie that obviously relies heavily on the music, as opposed to some other movies where it's not as an integral character of the piece.
Yeah, and one of the questions too, like Ben, with me, everything in one way, shape, or form will lead back to Star Trek.
Mm-hmm.
Ben worked on the 2009 Star Trek. Hello, Ben and Craig, you're back online.
Oh,
okay, there. So, sorry that we lost you there.
Okay.
I don't know how far into the question.
Let's just start a new question.
So, I guess my question is the drum solo, Caravan at the end of the movie. Now we know that Miles Teller was able to play the drums to an extent. He has experience, but the way I understand is that drum solo was pre-recorded. How difficult was that for you, matching with editing and sound and getting it in there so that you helped make Miles Teller's Andrew look like a drum rock star or jazz star?
It was definitely challenging. It was a mixture of, as you say, pre-record, production drums, and drum ADR that all had to be meshed together to sort of into what you hear in theater, and it just took time, and it took a lot of just sort of subtle nuance to sort of get it to where it needed to be.
And how many tracks did it take?
The pre-records were around 64 tracks a band, I think, and the production recording were a couple of tracks, and the drumming was around, I think, 20-odd tracks, I think.
Okay, now for a layman such as myself, is that a huge amount, or is that your normal thing you have to deal with?
That's quite a bit of material for a production of this size, I would say.
Yeah.
Were you supervising recording sessions, just saying do more takes, not my tempo, not my tempo? That's how I'm imagining.
No, we tried not to ride people too hard.
we were on the stage. We did start, depending on what kind of a mood we're in. We were both channeling JK's character at points. We were screaming. We were when Craig would have there's a scene in the movie where JK's character says that little trouble there, not quite my tempo.
Right.
And if either of us did something we didn't like, we'd say that to each other.
Now,
that was pretty funny.
Now, Ben, from you, I can see that. I mean, you are an ogre at the set. Of course, I'm kidding, and I kid with love. So Ben, were you on set? Like, I mean, as an editor, that scene, a lot of those scenes, but that scene in particular was directed like an action scene or a sports movie scene. Like, what were your challenges? I mean, were you on set? Did you get to see the previs so you had an idea going into like what you're gonna have to do?
No, I don't. I prefer not to do that. I prefer just to kind of jump in at the deep end to the film and try and retain that sort of first look feeling that you get, and try and stay connected to being an audience member. But the biggest challenge I had was putting back things that musicians would normally ask you to take out.
Oh, interesting.
So we had things where, qualified session musicians wouldn't necessarily let those sounds get out into the recordings, and we had to go back and put all those back in. So it didn't sound like a recording session.
May you please give us an example of what that might have been?
There's a big, normally there's an extreme close-up of someone playing a double bass, a stand-up bass. Right. And normally, the way you'd record that thing, you would record where the sound comes out, and you wouldn't record the guy's fingers as he's fretting, as he's changing the notes. Right. And so we went back in and re-recorded those sounds of the fingers touching the fretboard. Right. And there was also a ton of drum adjustment and stick handling as well. It's the most drumstick heavy movie I've ever worked on.
Oh, I'm sure, because I've seen quotes that to film somebody playing piano is often fairly simple because you can disguise their hands with the piano and just make it seem like they're hammering the keys properly. Drumming, you can't do that. You really have to match every single stroke and every single hit.
And who?
And as Craig mentioned, the final stage of all of that drum material coming together was hiring an incredibly skilled session drummer who was able to drum in time with what the actors did, because there are 3 drummers. There are 3 different actors drumming. And only one, I won't tell you which one, but only one of them could actually play with any kind of degree of accuracy.
Would I be correct in saying, because in research, Miles Teller has said that he's been playing drums since he was 15, and the director himself is somewhat of an accomplished bit of a drummer as well.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, which again we couldn't get away with anything.
Yeah.
He would see every single quarter beat of anything that got moved. He would see.
Was he in? Okay, just to give you guys try to give you a visual. We've all been familiar with what a soundboard is. Mm-hmm. The soundboards these gentlemen are working on are bigger than the room that we're in right now. I mean, it is huge. And to watch, I had the pleasure and honor of working with Ben earlier this year, and he's like a maestro in putting pods up, cooling them down, heat, and then dropping in a sound or finding a sound effect to put in. And it was just an amazing experience. So was the director over your shoulder, so to speak? Was Chazelle like right over you and saying, punch this up, or I want a little more snare, or I want that to be sharper, I want the splash, I want it to be a bigger splash? Was he giving you notes or telling you or saying, this is what I want?
Damien was definitely there every day, and he was very focused on what he wanted and didn't want, and he had a very clear picture in his head of what he wanted the track to be. And so, if we sort of advertised anything that he wasn't interested in or hadn't heard before, he wasn't particularly interested in. He was definitely very focused on what he wanted to have in the film.
Ben and Craig, this movie I think did a wonderful job, not only of all of the technical difficulties that you had to deal with, but also of, I think, bringing jazz into such a beautiful light. Do either of you guys have a past history with jazz music in particular, or connection to that in your past?
Wow.
Other than,
answers that.
A massive amount of drinking while listening to jazz music at some point in my life. No, that's about it. But no formal training or any other sort of formal relationship with.
I mean, look, I'm not a jazz aficionado either, but I think this movie did do a great job of making that world accessible to a layperson and understanding just how often physically strenuous this kind of music can be.
Exactly.
Did you, so with Caravan, in the sound, did you get to work on the soundtrack at all? I've been listening, I purchased the soundtrack, I've been listening to it nonstop, so is any of because there's even some dialogue in the soundtrack, is any of that your guys' magic and how you made and how the soundtrack sounds?
The dialogue is right from the mix that we shipped to the music department to put together on the soundtrack. And in terms of the actual score, not the pre-records, we got the stuff from the composer, and that's in the film, and we mixed that along with the rest of the pre-record material.
Well, that's amazing. The other thing too, and Ben, you the time we've spent together, and everybody here knows I'm a big Star Trek fan, so everything comes back to Star Trek. And Ben, you worked on Star Trek, so how different is it working on a movie like Star Trek with you have to almost create sounds or get sounds that are created, as opposed to working on Whiplash? What are the main differences?
The two main differences is the amount of time you have. I think we probably spent more on food on Star Trek than we did on the sound for Whiplash. And the second is that the Whiplash dealt with real sounds and things that the audience were familiar with. Mm-hmm. And Star Trek was more a matter of coming up with things that no one had ever seen or heard before. So it's a very different challenge. And some of the quiet scenes in Whiplash were some of the toughest that we've worked on in a while.
My one critique is I do think Whiplash could have used more laser sounds. like laser drums.
Definitely, and more monsters as well.
Yes, more monsters, yes. Well, I find that amazing. Like, why
were they more difficult?
Yeah.
Because when you're dealing with environments that people are familiar with, and you're dealing with sounds that people are familiar with, there's nowhere to hide. You have no justification for not doing it completely correctly. So everyone knows what people's feet sound like, or what a movie theater sounds like, or what a cup of tea in a saucer sounds like. So those things have to be perfect.
And I understand too that in the movie that it was a very tight schedule. There wasn't a lot of time where they can do a double take, triple take on certain things. Particularly, again, going back to the caravan drum solo, which comes in towards the end of the movie. When you're editing that, and they have coverage shots. They've got shots of snares and the cymbal, and then they'll go where you can see the audience, and then J.K. Simmons. And how difficult was it to try to match that from a sound perspective? Because it happened also quick.
With the type of schedule on that, you're really just kind of you're going with your gut a lot. You don't get time to do a lot of experimentation, or sometimes the real tragedy is sometimes you need 3 or 4 or 5 passes to really sort of get the creative vibe up to where it needs to be. And in this case, we've got a couple of passes to get it where it needs to be, and you got to get on to the next thing. So,
can you answer what time frame you did have, and what is the normal? What is a quote normal one you have?
This was around 2 weeks.
I think
you're kidding me. You're kidding me. Seriously?
2 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah.
And was this to get it ready for festivals and such?
Yeah, correct. That was for Sundance, and then after Sundance, I believe we had another. I asked if we could have another 2-3 days to sort of touch some stuff up that we had. And
how much would what would a normal time span be for you?
Well,
I know it varies very much, but what
it depends a little bit on budget. But
sure.
Each band might have a two week pre-dub, and then you might 2-week final,
right.
On a moderate budget. So
Okay.
you're at 6 weeks right there.
But I wonder if having that kind of accelerated schedule infused this movie with extra energy. I mean, I think just rushing through it and feeling like you're just making all these intuitive decisions helped kind of capture lightning in a bottle.
Well, there is something to be said for mixing on gut if you have good instincts, and I think a lot of the times you can overbake stuff if you have too much time on it. I think that's a valid argument.
Well, let me be at least one of the first to say that, and I mentioned this to Ben. I feel that outside of acting and such as being nominatable, I think sound editing and sound mixing in this movie
easily
completely nominatable. And let it be said here in Anatomy of a Movie that we hope this is the road. We hope this is the first step on that yellow brick road, because a lot of people will look at the bigger movies well, I'm not going to mention them, but bigger movies coming out, and you have a movie like Whiplash, and that's why I think it's an honor to have you folks. We want, as movie fans, it's amazing, what the blood, sweat, and tears you pour into this to make the sound and to get an audience wrapped up and to get an audience to like jazz. You guys did an amazing job.
Yeah.
Well, I think we like jazz more now than we did before. I'd never heard any. Neither of us had heard any of those songs before, so I still hum them to myself in the shower.
Wow.
That was a year ago.
So you worked on this a year ago, huh?
Yeah, we got it. Yeah, we got it ready. I think the first week of January we had to have it done for Sundance.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, again, just kudos. You both did an amazing job.
It really is an incredible accomplishment. Then, given that you just told us it took 10 days, I just can't even understand it.
And I saw it in a theater that has a relatively nice sound system. I mean, it popped, and just listening to the soundtrack and what went into the recording and how it does use perfect stereo. Yeah, you gentlemen did an amazing job, and we wish you continued success. This is fantastic.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you again for coming. And
wait, I do have to ask,
okay,
are you allowed to say, what are you gentlemen working on now?
We can't really
can't
really discuss that right now.
Okay.
Technicolor does not advocate any sort of discussion of projects that are going on.
I understand. I truly understand. But
if you go on IMDb, you might be able to find out, but we can't say.
Gotcha.
Fair enough. Well, at some point then, on whatever a movie is, we'd really love you to come in and join us in studio, because it would be fantastic to have you. I think this is a great piece for all of the Anatomy of a Movie audience members. So thank you very much.
We know you're working right now, so again, we want to thank you very much for taking the time out in your busy day to come here and be part of this. So we appreciate that very much.
I look forward to your Oscar acceptance speech.
Yes, just remember Anatomy of a Movie.
All right, thanks, guys.
Thanks, folks.
Okay.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
We'll talk later. Bye-bye.
That was great to have Ben on, and Craig. We appreciate that so much.
So
I have like 5 more questions.
You did? Ask them now. Maybe they'll judge you. Well,
No.
the next time we get
Go
this.
ahead. What are they?
I really want to know what their favorite scene turnout was. I want to know when they said they went back and corrected after Sundance, what changes they made. And my random question of the day is, I really want to know the name of the studio drummer who matched 3 different drummers.
Oh, yeah, so we can check his material out. For all we know, he's like a jazz drummer who's got albums and stuff.
Well, I'm wondering if it's, I'd have to look it up, but I'm wondering if it's the guy that's credited on the soundtrack.
Possibly. But I think that I was just like blown away by that's really amazing to be able to do that visually. Because like for me, if we're going to get into the movie and you're talking about the times where he's like going tempo, a little bit faster, a little bit slower, I like to think that I am musically inclined. I do.
Did you play an instrument?
I played an instrument for 10 years.
What did you
I was
play
in
again?
band. I was in choir. Like, I've done lots of music, and I could not hear which one was faster and which one was slower. I was literally like, am I supposed to be able to hearing this? And is he just crazy? Is he just yelling for no reason? Like, I couldn't hear it.
I was able to kind of talk myself into thinking, okay, he's rushing there, okay, he's dragging there, but I don't really know.
That's the thing. Or like later when you got the scene about the kid being in tune.
Right.
That was also reliving personal fears of mine.
Oh, that scene was
matching.
Now, see, that scene was pure evil.
Yeah.
That scene.
But it makes you question. If someone's that in your face, you're like, I'm wrong. I'm wrong. I don't even know if I'm right. But
yeah, my nightmares are just having J.K. Simmons inches from my face screaming at the top of his lungs.
Also, getting the air support that you don't go sharp or flat while someone's yelling at you.
Yeah.
Sorry. I don't know. There's a lot of anxiety.
Yeah, again, yeah, and to your point, Josh, I do believe, too, that at times I think the movie was meant to make you anxious or a little bit on edge because you knew it was coming. And like, you were saying, I was saying, I've again, not through the education process, through the work process, I've worked with abusive people before, and it was so weird because, that scene where he takes him aside and he's like, so, your first year, what about your family, blah, blah, blah,
right,
blah.
And I totally felt you were thinking like, oh my God, he's just getting info out of this guy, so you can use it against him later.
And I just like going, oh, good God, because like I had that happen to me, and then whatever I had said to this guy came back, used against me. It was like insane, and he would do it in front of an office. So, I mean, the way J.K. Simmons played that character to me was amazing, and Miles Teller and the way he was able to, well, he stood up in a sense to him.
He did what? I'm sorry.
He stood up to the best of his capabilities to him. But we'll talk about the end a little bit more, because apparently there is some controversy, which I think is good.
I wonder how many people are going to watch this movie and think, you know what, I agree, the worst 2 words in the English language are good job, and this is what it takes to inspire true greatness.
I do not subscribe to that. Neither does J.K. Simmons. He, J.K. Simmons has said, no, there's nothing masochistic. That doesn't belong in this world. And, but
there's a lot of people who do believe that and do push that.
That for me is one of the places where it falls down. But go ahead.
Interesting.
See, the thing is, what I do think that while the perspective displayed in this movie is not right or healthy, I think it exists.
Yeah.
And I've witnessed it, and like bringing that part to light versus a lot of times in a hero's journey, we get them earning more from straight talent or being able to balance love and friendship. In this movie, Miles has a huge driving force behind him that is, I think, beyond dedication. And there are people who are that focused, and they work well with teachers like this.
Right.
And I've met both parts of this story in real life, and they are scary to be around. And I don't agree with how they live, but it was interesting to see that portrayed on film, because we don't get that. We don't get the mentor-mentee relationship that is abusive on film unless one like wins.
Every Army movie, Full Metal Jacket,
right? But there, it's clearly supposed to be an abusive relationship. Here, it's more ambiguous.
Well, here it's ambiguous, and here it's based on.
How is it ambiguous? I mean, it's clear from the get-go he's a monster.
To me, it's different because
what he
this
says
is about
terrible.
like the creatives, like creatives who so much are portrayed as driven by a passion or a love of the art or genuine talent. And in this, we understand he's talented, but it's there's so much focus on practice and on drive and on hard work, which I found very interesting to see on film.
You know, Terrence Fletcher might have discouraged a lot of his students. It's implied he may have even driven one of them to suicide. So his methods aren't going to work. They make it clear it doesn't work on most students, but maybe for somebody who is intense as Andrew Naiman, it's what he needs to like unlock his potential.
Well, I think one thing to note here, and this is going to segue into one of my favorite scenes in the movie, is that we're not familiar with this world of going to
Juilliard.
Oh,
I'm sorry. Did I say that?
Schaefer.
No, but and the thing is that we are accustomed to the Full Metal Jackets. We're accustomed to seeing the sports movie in which the coach will yell at somebody for dropping a ball, or like we're accustomed to that. But this is bringing us into a whole music is never seen the same way as like sports. And one of the things that Damien had said too is he goes, I wanted to show that music is just as physical. Go ahead.
I would say like the closest, in my perspective, that we ever see is ballet. Ballet sometimes push to the sixth.
Black Swan for sure came to mind when I was watching this. Where
it's a creative, it's also a sport, it's athletic, but it's kind of rides that line between being an art and being an athletic capability. And ballet is, people are now familiar with the discipline it takes. It's really not that apparent, and I feel like most musical instruments, and like I've had friends who've gone to musical conservatories and been in these positions, like had crazy teachers, and like sometimes lose sight of what gets them involved in the music in the first place, which is that they love it, and then they end up hating certain pieces.
The parallels to Black Swan are actually really interesting because it also has this messed up mentor-protege relationship, and it also ends in this kind of climactic showdown where the artist finally becomes perfect, at the cost of at the expense of her own body. It also has all this focus on kind of the body horror of your art. I loved Black Swan too, by the way.
Yeah, it's funny. I had a conversation before I get back into Black Swan, but again, I would say the difference between a ballet, an audience, much like going to a stage show, an audience actually sees the physicality that's taking place, much like they see the physicality of a football game, baseball game, whatever kind of sport. Outside of horseshoes and maybe golf, you see the physicality as to what's going on in front of you. With music, again, we're so in tune to seeing music videos, and they're playing their guitar, their drums, their bass, their keyboards. You don't see them. It's romantic, and you don't see really the physicality that's put into it. And that's what I believe where this movie really works, is showing that the physical endurance that can take toll on a body. And my favorite scene being my favorite scene is they had a scene at a dinner table. And it was the family dinner table, and the cousins come in. And, Miles Teller was talking about, I'm in the Schaefer program. I got this instructor, and this is great. And then as soon as the cousins come in, they started talking about football. It was like, music, that's you're playing drums, big deal.
Yeah, but it's just Division 3.
Yeah, and well, I love the fact how he stood up for himself. He goes, "You're playing Division 3." It's like, that's nothing. And he's like, "Why? You want to come out and play sometimes?" Yeah, those are words you'll never hear from the NFL. and again,
but his dad also says,
"Yeah, those are the words you'll never hear from Lincoln Center." I think everyone at that table was just all in the wrong. It was a great scene though.
It was a great scene.
It was a great scene, but the whole time
and
I was
shows, Naiman has this colossal ego as well.
Yeah, I also think that that scene was, I thought was a great scene. And I thought it really started something which I was disappointed that it didn't follow through with, because it showed that Andrew had the ability to go toe-to-toe with people verbally. And it was kind of like a jazz thing going on, people, you know, and I love that. But I thought, well, this is going to be great. So he has a voice. He can't stand up for himself, but he doesn't with Fletcher, and that pissed me off.
But I think that there's a point to that. I think there is. The thing.
But okay, there is, and I agree. But what then for me, all it was Fletcher belittling, demeaning, doing all the stuff that he does. Him going away and practicing, coming back and doing better. Oh, let's have another screaming, yelling match. Him going away, practicing, doing better. So, but he never ever grows into that part. For me, Andrew doesn't grow into the part where he could, because it would have been much more interesting to me if anybody opposed Fletcher.
But I disagree. I disagree. I think he does stand up for himself.
He does when he goes to fight him, and before they have the final thing.
I mean, many times he does go back to his room and practice, but plenty of other times he says, "What you're telling me? This is BS." And he goes and he fights the guy, and then he gets him fired.
But that's not what he did at that dinner table. That dinner table was far more interesting than saying, "What? You can't take my job." No, I earned it. That, who cares? That's not verbal sparring that we saw there.
It's not.
And that's the thing that was missing for me, is that he has the ability to do this. He can stand up for himself, go toe to toe. And what I wanted to see is that character grow into that.
Well, it's not verbal. It's not verbal sparring, but there's for sure a battle of wills going on. And
that's clear. But I just thought it fell flat by not having him be able to do that when he clearly has the ability to.
Yeah. Well, I'm just gonna jump right into the end then, because on one hand, I sort of agree with you, because I felt at the end when he was completely humiliated by what Fletcher did, and that was just so, like, when that happened,
awesome.
Like, did you I was just like, what you did?
I know that's how good. I mean, that's how horrible he is.
So,
I think that's terrific.
But I loved it when he comes back.
Yeah,
and he's like, what are you doing? What are you doing? And he starts drumming, and he goes to the bassist, or the pianist, and he's like,
cue you in, or whatever.
Yeah, I'll cue you in, Caravan. And then as he's drumming, he just looks at me and goes, you. Yeah. And see,
you tried to humiliate me, but I'm going to use this scenario that you set up to my advantage.
And then I was all in. I was applauding.
Yeah.
The part at the very end, well, I was applauding at that because he was... he was standing up, and he's like, fuck you. And I was like, okay, that's great. And then it all got deflated from me at the end when J.K. Simmons, when Fletcher smiles at him, and he's like, and then he smiled
now
back.
It's about the music.
And then I'm like, okay, you just fell into the battered wife. Like, and that
see, but I think that was the
acceptance.
Point. I think that was the point, and that's why.
What was the point?
That it. He wanted so much to be a drummer that it didn't matter if he was being abused. It was on his path, so he was going to suffer through it and do it and get approval of this guy because he wants to be the best drummer, and that's a sacrifice that he's willing to make for it. And it's not even a sacrifice because it is pushing him. Like, that's how I took it. And I took it as when they have the scene after Fletcher's been fired and they meet in the jazz club.
Yeah.
And there's almost like there's a willingness in Miles, almost like I shouldn't have given into the pressure and let me turn you in or witness against you. Like, I should be your student. You are so intense, but you do make me better. And look, maybe I could do all this. I felt like there was like a willingness into that.
And that's what I mean. That's what I mean when I call it a love story. Like, Andrew clearly respects this guy, and Fletcher's
in a sadomasochistic way.
And,
so that's
Fletcher's obsessed with Andrew from the beginning. I mean, you could disagree with his methods, and I do disagree with his methods, but it's clear that his goal from the very beginning is to single this kid out because he thinks he could be his Charlie Parker.
And and I see that, but to me, the way I looked at it is that Miles Teller's character, right now his name just escaped me. Andrew was not only looking the better, he was looking for the acceptance that he never got anywhere else. And when you have somebody who's abusive, you just want to try harder to make that abusive person happier.
Yeah.
And that's like, it wasn't necessarily doing it for the art. It was to be accepted by the person who's like humming cymbals at your head,
right?
And you want to make that person happy.
Well, that's what
to me that's the mixed message, and
that's what's so twisted about this movie is this really unhealthy relationship that does lead to this moment of artistic greatness at the end.
Mm-hmm.
But I think his artistic greatness was there. Like I think his artistic greatness. I think it was there. He was a gifted person, I believe, or at least that character seemed to be gifted. And he could have gone on like to say good job to somebody isn't necessarily, if you're not doing a good job, you don't say good job. You don't necessarily throw a chair at them either.
Right.
You can get some positive reinforcement out of somebody. Again, I just felt.
But I just liked this portrayal of their way of thinking, that like that was included, that good job was enough, because it was interesting to me. It was something that's a way I've seen, but not the way I was raised on. It was really interesting to get really into their minds, to see their perspective, to watch him have multiple conversations where over and over Andrew, whether it was breaking up with his girlfriend and telling her like she was gonna ruin his life to the extreme, or if you go back to the dinner scene where he has a line about it's better to like die at 34 than be remembered with the fans, and they both have, his family versus him have their own perspective, but at least his point of view to me was very clear, like what he wanted and how he was going to get it was, I thought, very well lived, and was just motivating him in every scene.
Andrew's kind of a terrible person.
Oh yes, well, I completely think so.
He's not
terrible. I mean, I don't think he's malicious in any way.
Well,
what about that breakup scene?
Yeah, I mean, we could talk about the breakup scene. I
actually thought that's a smart way to go. If that's what he really feels, then yeah, he should say so now. So why have her invest any time or energy into him?
Yeah, and
that doesn't seem to be.
Yeah, but you can argue like why he fits into the terrible person mold, quote unquote, is how he broke up with her.
Well, it'd be worse to stay with her.
But then also, if you just look at his interactions with people about in so many other films, he would have been your villain. He would have been the villain who is competing for first chair and who is over the top obsessed with it, and who, when he doesn't get it, throws a fit, throws things. He's on the phone calling other people in his band, asking them for help, but cursing at them. In almost any other movie, he'd be the villain, and your hero would be the redheaded guy who is
Connolly, I think.
Connolly, who doesn't do anything wrong in this film. He is very nice. He seems to have good relationships with the people in his band, with a girl. He is in just the same talented positions. He would typically play our hero, and Neiman he would overcome, and the guy who was obsessed and a workaholic would lose out because something about talent and emotion and your relationship with people would overcome that. That is how normally this story would go, but instead they pulled your attention off Conley and focused it in on Andrew and made his perspective clear and like humanized his way of being so extremely focused.
Right. I mean, yeah, Neiman is, first of all, he's the guy who takes a girl on a first date to a shitty pizza place because they had played jazz music, so he has something to talk about. He has nothing. He's so single-minded.
How do you know it's a shitty pizza place?
It looked like a crappy pizza place.
I don't know. Pizza in New York. You can go into a place like that. It's the best pizza in the world.
You might be right. So. But then, yeah, at that breakup scene, you're right. Maybe he had a good motivation to break up with her, but the way he did it, she said to him, "So you want to break up with me because you're going places and I don't know what I want to do, and you've got everything and I've got nothing to look forward to." And he just says, "Yeah, pretty much."
Well, I'm not saying it's not honest. I'm saying it was but overall, in your average film, those qualities, those conversations, you wouldn't be making him your villain.
Well, and again, the way I looked at the breakup scene was from a couple of ways. Number one, we hadn't actually seen this couple together for a whole hell of a lot of time. Yeah. It is assumed that there's been a little bit of passage of time and that they've gone out on more than just the one date that we've seen them, but we never see that in the movie. It's hard to draw sympathy in a relationship that we're not familiar with. So going the Paul Verhoeven route, and I say that from like RoboCop, is that you had to make that breakup nasty to like, it puts a face to the dehumanization that Andrew is going through. And it had to be nasty for there to be any sympathy for her. And there are two ideologies. Like, again, I can empathize and sympathize with a person who's a first year of college who doesn't exactly have their sure footing. And on the other hand, you had Andrew, who knew exactly what he wanted to do. And for some reason, those worlds were colliding. That breakup had to be nasty to get any sympathy, because outside, why do we care about this relationship? We really only see them together when he goes to the movie. One and a half times, maybe. Yeah. So there's that, and then there is putting the face on. It's seeing how the victim reacts to being dehumanized and because he basically told them.
He starts to become like him.
Yeah. But I think he was dehumanized from the beginning. And I think that's why he clicks with Terrence Fletcher's philosophy so well, why he hears that story about Joe Jones.
How was he dehumanized from the beginning?
I think you don't necessarily see it, but because the very first scene you see is when he's already talking to Fletcher. But I think it's just implied that he's been so obsessive from such a young age that he clicks with Fletcher's philosophy. He thinks, you're right, I do have to be so single-mindedly focused on this and not taking anybody else's feelings into account. He's got that intensity already in him, and that's why he responds to what Fletcher's doing.
And one other thing that we didn't mention, too, as far as relationships go, the orchestra, the band, we'll just call them the band, there were no relationships in that band. Like, they were all there. They performed together as a band, as a team. They performed collaboratively great. But once it was done, it was like, fuck you. Don't look at me.
That's a product of the environment that they work in.
Oh, yeah.
No, absolutely. So, his only relationship was with his dad. And we should talk a little bit, too, I think, about Paul Reiser, who puts in this very sensitive,
really
nice,
good job. That's such a naturalistic performance. Such just a sweet, caring dad.
Couldn't agree more. And again, when he's humiliated at Carnegie Hall, or wherever it was Carnegie Hall, I believe, or the Lincoln Center, he goes to his dad, and his dad
comes running to him.
Yeah, his dad comes running to him, but they meet and he hugs him. And again, I think for me, it is about acceptance. I mean, he picked playing an instrument, which doesn't get the popularity in high school that playing on the football team or the baseball team or in track does.
And he picked jazz, too.
Drummers are cool. Drummers get girls.
Not jazz drummers.
Maybe not a jazz drummer.
And maybe if they've made it as a look, you can look like if I knew how to play the guitar or the drums, yes. Anybody who's a rock star, it doesn't matter what your looks are. But I think with him, the acceptance. I just think that for him too, a lot of it was acceptance. We talked about a movie earlier this year. I really hate to bring this up, but because we talked about the Chloe Moretz movie when she was the celloist.
Cellist.
Now it didn't go into If I Stay. It didn't go so much into the mechanics and the teaching, but however, it did talk about how she's a celloist. She cellist. She didn't have that many friends and all. And one of the things that I said was positive. She was isolated, but it was a positive. In that movie, I looked at it as, hey, this is someone who knows what she wants to do. She's relatively talented at what she does. Her parents are supporting her. Like, I like that aspect. And in this movie, you get, Paul Reiser, and he talks about, I still go to the movies with my dad. Like, that was a nice moment as well when they were talking on their first date. And like how she misses home and everything. He goes, no, I still go to the movies with my dad. And he has that tether, so to speak. But it's really interesting. I was wondering, we never heard the conversation like when he went, hey, Dad, guess what? I'm going to be playing at Lincoln Center. That's the good news. But it's going to be with that Terrence Fletcher guy. Like, what do you think he would have said?
Are you sure you want to do this?
No,
and go
he
back
would
to
have said,
that?
I'm not letting my son go back to this relationship. I'm like, it would have been a bad conversation. An interesting one, though, that I was also curious to see. Bringing up, like, If I Stay, one thing that was, I'm not sure if I'm happy about it being left out of this movie or not, was in most musical films, we get a very large percentage of the love or the care for the music.
Not that at all.
It's normally like 80% of like passionate for music scenes and like 20% of this is the work, this is the downside. And this one got kind of flipped on its head where it was 80% of the blood, sweat, and tears and about 20% of the I care about this. One of this was if you look at the jazz club scene where Fletcher's actually playing, they do give that moment where he like seems to be invested in the piano playing or in the music.
Well, it's such a distinctive look at music because it does treat music like a sport and not a passion. You know, during that dinner table scene, they when he says he's like one of the best drummers in the world, and they say, "Isn't music subjective?" And he just says, No. In this world, music is not subjective. It's about hitting exact beats and being exactly on key at all times.
And it was that. Yeah,
and that's also speaks to her point where it's really not about the art of music. It's much more about the technique.
Right.
Which is why it's so stressful.
No, but see, I don't know. I did look at his passion for drumming. I mean, the photos he had, Buddy Rich was taped up, and jazz, these famous jazz drummers. I believe that he has the passion. And again, he wasn't listening to today's music.
No, I think for me the point was that it's really not about the art side of music. It's really more about the technique side. For me, I don't really get that. What's his name? Fletcher really is that interested in the artistic side of it.
Not at all.
I don't think he's interested in that.
It's completely a boot camp
I won't give it at all. I give it the 20-80%, and the 20% is those little glimpses where he does kind of like, or when he says his student that passed away was a beautiful player. Like he doesn't focus on him being a good person or a good student
or that
anything.
He's dead. He seems to be more upset that
we've lost a beautiful player of music, and that to me, that to me implies some love of the art of the sound. So that's what I'm saying. I'm not giving it 100% like just practice, but I'm giving
because you could also be taken as there's another one who's not going to be a Charlie Parker. Damn, it's not about the fact that a human being died.
No.
It's just
it's purely about the
that, and also the scene just before that where Simmons gets the call about Sean Casey dying, and then Eddie walks in like, I want the part, and he blows up at him, but in a way that's different than the ways you've seen him blow up at him before, where he seems like uncontrolled and genuinely emotional. It's the Sean Casey moments are the only places where you really see Simmons let his guard down. And I think it adds this kind of fascinating dimension to the character where you see this is a human being. Yeah,
and and again though, I think that with music, and particularly jazz, but you can look at it at rock, as rock music. I've loved music since I was a kid. I've loved drums. I took drums for about 5 minutes as a kid. My favorite drummer was Stuart Copeland of the Police. One of the reasons why is because he's a rock drummer who knew some jazz and rhythms, but he drummed like the traditional drummer. He didn't drum like this, and he was just amazing. I could be mesmerized watching people do that, work that hard behind a kit. Now, I just think that when we are talking about the physicality in the sports, I don't know. I think there was a passion on Andrew's part. He wanted this. With jazz, there are notes. You have to be precise. There has to be that certain kind of time. And if you're working with a Branford Marsalis or the Marsalis family or anybody, when you listen to jazz and you can change rhythms and beats so quickly, and then a drummer can counterman that beat to make music, and to have drums make music, as opposed we're all used to listening to guitars and to the bass and to piano for that matter, but drums are very rhythmic and can make their own like music. So I think that the precision in jazz is more so than most any other outside of maybe classical.
I mean, this cinematic moment in particular, to bring up this, and also Birdman, which had this very strong drumming score. If you've seen the movie Birdman, for some reason I think there's a couple of movies now that are using this extremely percussive drum-based kind of music, and it just adds like an energy and like a driving force to the movie. That's I think amazing.
So.
Well, I will say one thing about the physicality. I thought for me it was a little overplayed. The drummers are going to hate me for this, but when he was starting to get his blister and
there's blood all over the snares,
I was like, oh, he has a blister. Well, honestly, I swear to God, I started laughing because it's like I'm supposed to feel horrible for. All I could think of was Dire Straits' "Money for Nothing" and you maybe get a blister on your finger, maybe get a blister on your thumb. I'm just going, And then the shot with the pitcher of ice water and it all turns red. I'm going, please, that's a little much.
It's a blister.
It's a little much.
It's a horrible blister.
And I was thinking of all guys that spend their lives in coal mines. I go, please stop already.
Okay, well, it's funny that you say that because they showed this movie to people who are part of Brentford Marsalis's Live at Lincoln Center Jazz, which you can listen on Sirius satellite radio if you have it, Sirius XM. Now they showed it to them, and they said, "So what did you think? How true was it? Did you have teachers like that?" And one of them said, "Nah, sort of." And he's like, "Really?" He goes, "Were we too hard?" He goes, "No, you weren't hard enough." He goes, He goes, that blood, he goes,
I believe it happens.
Yeah.
I know, I get that part. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but it was so it wasn't. It's a friggin' blister. It's not that tragic.
It's not supposed to be.
I don't know,
it's not
but
that
if
it's
you're
tragic.
drumming,
But that's how it came across. It was overplayed to the point where I started going, please, enough already. I get it.
It's genuinely physically demanding, and the way playing.
I'm not saying it isn't. I'm saying it's
playing a sport
overplayed.
and getting an injury.
I think what you're trying to say, what I'm getting from it is, and I agree with you, is that
it's not like he lost a finger.
The blister, yes, it's like the blister got 10 different frames.
Yeah.
And you're
there are multiple
talking, and if you're
blisters.
comparing that to people who do in other fields of work get much worse injuries, yes, you got a blister. It hurts. But if you're scaling how people get hurt in the work environment on a scale of 1 to 10, blister is not that far up the list. You can talk about how massage therapists, after every 2 hours, have to ice their hands so they go numb, so they can, and that's rubbing people. But that is strenuous work as well. But it's just how much you dramatize that one blister. Is that kind of what you're saying?
What about that car accident? I mean, that was brutal. What he walked away from.
That's also crazy, and it's not related to the blister.
I'm not saying it does.
I will concede to the point that yes, a football player, hockey player, baseball player can. No, I will concede to that point that yes, they can break a limb, a neck,
lose their teeth.
And yes, that is a far more serious injury that player's out for the season or for their life. Depending on the injury. To a musician. Who's a jazz musician?
I get it. There's how else do you dramatize it? I get it. I'm not suggesting he shouldn't have it in there. I just say, okay, let's put a second Band-Aid on. Can we move off the blister now?
It was just too much. You the mention. It was
a
good mention. There is blood. There is
blisters. It's not like the movie No Limit when he's running with his foot all cut up and he's running at friggin' 10 miles with his foot bleeding. That's the other movie that this reminded me of, No Limits. I don't know if anybody saw that. But it's same kind of obsession. Yeah,
and again, I was he was looking for. Well, he didn't want to lose his stool, and
so
and it was so to speak, and it was acceptance. I'm gonna power through this and more or less pass out.
Andrew Naiman is this obsessive guy who shuts himself in his room and listens to Buddy Rich tapes and practices drumming over and over again. It doesn't seem like that's the dominant mindset at Schaefer. And I do wonder, the other students in Fletcher's class.
Well, that's also part of it that I didn't like. It's we don't know. They didn't spend any time with anything, so there's been a lot of context.
To me, that was fine because I've seen so many movies and so many films about the other people. I haven't seen this perspective. I haven't seen I have seen so many music movies. I've seen people with the love, with the supportive family, with the making the relationship work, or the biggest trouble is balancing that, or that one of the people is going to go off to another state. I've seen all of those. I've seen those stories.
I can imagine exactly what the other kids are doing. Fletcher leaves the room, and whoever the new kid's man, what's with this guy? And they're oh, it's just that's how Fletcher is. Don't let it bother you. Naiman never has that conversation with anybody.
Andrew in most films and other music films is a secondary character. He's the secondary character who comes in and shows how obsessive something can be, how it can be. You can take the love out of something. So it was interesting to me to see his mindset.
I didn't see him as that obsessive, honestly.
Who?
Andrew, because for me, if anybody's going to go to Juilliard or whatever, I'm thinking they were practicing when they go to their room.
Yeah.
It seems like what everybody else does.
I don't disagree with that, but...
how do you get to Juilliard? Practice.
But
it's not just about how much you practice. It's about the fact that you're isolating yourself from other students.
But that's what everybody does who's trying to do that at that level.
I don't...
That's my experience. So it didn't really seem...
And I guess that's not mine, especially... if you're going into certain music, it depends on the exact medium in which people are performing. for instance, you would think that most percussionists would need to find other people to work with.
Jazz is a collaborative art form.
Yes, because you have a lot of ensemble pieces, and forming a band that you can make music with is normally pretty important to a drummer.
But I don't get your argument, because the idea is that you don't practice. Are you saying you don't practice ever alone? Because I
think you do, but I think that there are a lot of people involved in music who find joy in practicing with other people.
I don't disagree with that. The way I looked at this, what happens in Fight Club stays in Fight Club. They weren't going to go out and talk about. They kept it within their little group.
Yeah, I know. They're very...
And we know that in one way, shape, or form it got out because, well, we had that student who committed suicide. Yeah. And there was a direct relation that the parents felt. They couldn't quite prove... but they felt that it was the instructor's fault.
Oh, I think that's true. But you'd think they would at least talk with each other about what's going on.
I'm sure they do, but not
like they don't have a faculty at this place. Everybody knew what was going on. Nobody ever confronts him. Nobody ever questions it. Nothing.
And I get that. The way I perceived it, I could be completely off. Is okay. They all know how he is. They also know how prestigious it is to have that.
To be a part of it.
Yeah, but have that be part of the movie. That's great conflict.
Well, and what I gathered from it is that one scene that we talked about earlier in which he said, okay, so somebody here is out of key. Somebody here is off key. He goes, who is it? Just stand up now. Are you trying to kibosh? And then he picks out this kid and he goes, it was you. Are you out of key? And I think that scene alone pretty much set up that people are terrified. They don't want to lose their spot, but they're not going to necessarily... They're not going to stand up to this guy. Right. And then he says, yes, I was out of key. And he's like, get out. Like, leave now. Somebody come in and take his chair. And then he admits he wasn't out of key at all. But I don't need anybody who doesn't know that they're out of key. And it was you. And that scene to me set up the fact that these people, he has them under such a reign of terror.
That goes to my point I'm making earlier, which to me got boring, because I knew going in that no one's ever going to come up, no one's ever going to stand up to him, and when it never happened, I went, okay. But it was just a repeat of everything.
But again, even if Andrew never stood up and like, you know what, I don't agree with your methods anymore, you got to listen to me. There was a major contest going on between them, and eventually Andrew made moves that got Fletcher fired.
He did take steps. If you look at Andrew's steps, though, there was the point where he yelled at him in front of the class, which we saw no one else do. Then you see him argue for his part and say that he's right prior to him getting in the car wreck. Then he gets in the car wreck and still puts himself on stage and utterly fails.
I don't disagree with that, but I still think that for me, it's a missed opportunity when you show me how capable this guy is, and then the only time he confronts him is by doing that, which is nowhere near what he's capable of. Right. And it's just like, well, that's a character beat that's missing for me, and you set up a whole thing that you just let by the wayside.
But I understand Andrew's mindset. His mindset is, I'm going to show Fletcher what's what. I'm going to show him by playing the best damn drum solo of my life.
I don't think that's what he was doing. I don't think he was doing it from that motivation at all.
Yeah, I think it was like, no, I am going to be the bird. Like, I'm going to be the next bird.
Yeah, you think I'm nothing. Well, guess what? I'm going to show you how amazing I am. It's that kind of...
Yeah. And to me, that worked when he said, fuck you.
Right.
And then I'm like, he goes, because you know what? I deserve this spot. And you're not going to bother me anymore. I'm going to show off my talents. But then again, it's sort of.
But then for me, they ruined it by having him. Oh, I know where you're going here. Let's work together and make amazing music. It's like, wow, come on. The whole movie is predicated on that.
You know what? And that to me was like
fell to pieces.
I didn't get as angry as you did, but I got saddened. Like it bothered me because, again, he got that acceptance that he wanted, that he is a great drummer, and that he wanted to be. And he's like, okay, you can beat me some more. I'm going to stick around with you so you can whip me some more.
And to me, it fit their relationship. To me, it was just, no, it's not where this is not the world that I want to be a part of, or be close to, or be like, have involved in my life. But it was interesting to watch.
Right.
And like,
right, and I think on some sick level, this is what Andrew wants. He wants the guy who's gonna just try to discourage him with everything he can and eventually push him to his limit. Yeah. Most students aren't necessarily gonna be like that. But no. I think what makes this dynamic work is the fact that student and teacher are kind of equally matched, and they finally end up on the same page by the end, which makes a weird, sick, happy ending.
Yeah, well, and
to me, it just becomes a whole thing. Well, yeah, I'll show you. Oh, yeah, I'll show you, and then that gets boring. That's like, okay, great, here we go.
I was thrilled by that.
The ending, the acceptance, sort of kind of like, oh, you're accepting it. Like when I thought you were like, to me, what my perfect ending would have been, and this is just me, is if he gets out there, fuck you, he does this drumming, and when he's done, that's what I was thinking. He fucking throws the six at him and goes, now I quit. Now it's time. Now I can go. You don't predicate. Maybe one of the sticks gets right in his eye like a horror movie. I would have been like, that would have been like, okay, you know what, Andrew? You learned something. You
would have had there would have been an arc.
It would have been like you rose from the ashes. And again, to me, it's almost like this wasn't even like the draw at the end of Rocky.
Yeah.
Like, I mean,
don't want one.
Yeah, I mean, Rocky sticks through it to the end, and you're happy that he does. In this movie, he sticks through it to the end, but like, that his humanity, a big piece of his humanity just died when he like smiled and said, oh, okay, teacher, beat me some more.
I see two like messed up, abusive, self-centered people who kind of deserve each other having this moment of triumph at the end.
I kind of agree with you. I think it's interesting. We haven't talked about how this movie came to really be made.
Off a short.
It's off a short. I mean, the movie was written as, I believe, an 85-page script, and then couldn't get funding, was blacklisted, and then they made a short to raise funding.
You see this more and more now as kind of the proof of concept short, where they'll film like a scene or two from a script to show people, hey, this is what it could do with the full movie.
Yeah. So they did that, and it worked.
Yeah.
Congrats to you.
It sort of worked. I mean,
it worked that they were able to make the feature.
That they were able to make the film, but even with the short, they were still having a hard time. Like, they were still having a hard time because it was jazz. And if it wasn't for Blumhouse, who came in and helped fund
figured out how to do it,
and get that done, and then Sony Classics, who handled the distribution for this, and to your point, yes, I mean, Saw, the entire franchise relied on a short.
Yeah.
In filming the head trap scene, that was all they had to go around to show people.
We're gonna see Whiplash 2 when they tour together.
Yes. Well, it's funny that one thing that we didn't talk about too, and we'll get more into the origins and some more tech stuff, but the type of jazz music that Fletcher was playing was so different than the jazz music that he was teaching, that he was orchestrating. I thought that to be a very fascinating dichotomy. I mean, he's in a club playing smooth jazz, like basically, where the jazz that he's teaching is a little bit more big band.
Well, that was to soften him up so we could have that scene right after.
Well, again, though, it's one of those things like, we never saw him play drums. The only instrument we see him play is piano.
No, and I don't think he's supposed to be a great musician. And I think he says in that scene afterwards, I was, what I see as my purpose is to inspire people to greatness. That's what he's all about, not necessarily being the center of greatness himself.
Yeah.
Well, even that it's like, okay, that's great, that's wonderful motivation, but there's no comeback, no challenge to that. It's like, really? Well, then why don't you have all these Charlie Parkers? Maybe it's not your students, but it might be your method.
Right.
But there's nothing.
But
like
I think
that.
there's a greater belief that there should only be very, very, very few Charlie Parkers.
Maybe there should. But if he's so good at his job, why doesn't he push himself to the degree that
I don't know.
I
didn't need a character to say that. I think that was implied by the film.
I don't think it was, because again, if he's so good, or if he believes in that kind of perfection, why didn't he apply that same kind of stuff to himself? And he doesn't.
Well, we sort of know that he's good because it is mentioned how many times they've gone through competition coming out as being number one. So he's able to, at least in that capacity.
But if his method is that I have to just discourage the crap out of people so that I can develop these Charlie Parkers, why isn't he better at it?
Yeah.
Well, he says he's never found a Charlie Parker.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Maybe it's not the pupil, it's the method.
But I think a Charlie Parker's a once in a lifetime thing.
Right, and to assume that the only way we can get one is by this method is ridiculous. That's why the implausibility flag.
To me that worked because I think there are people like this.
It's kind of like you give a bunch of kids, golden tickets to the chocolate factory, but only one of them is going to make it through to the very end.
This is his solution. This is how it works. It's
and
not.
Yet it hasn't at all for him. So that's why I'm just going, okay.
Yeah, I mean, I totally get what you're saying, and he used the Charlie Parker, but again, since Andrew's a drummer,
and let's face Miles Davis. He knows Miles Davis quit Juilliard in his freshman or whatever first semester, or whatever. It's like you've got to be aware of that if you're aware of the other.
Also, apparently, Joe Jones never actually threw a cymbal at Charlie Parker's head.
It was at his feet.
Yeah, he threw a cymbal at the ground essentially and kind of scared Parker, but
and it wasn't off losing the tempo. It was off of missing a key change.
Yeah, I think that was right. So,
yeah, so
some things were a little dramatized for the movie.
Of course.
Well, but here's the thing, and that's another thing where I go, well, why your guy who knows everything about Buddy Rich and he's so obsessive, he doesn't learn that? He doesn't know that story's not accurate? I mean, I'm just saying that for me, I go, that's you could have been such great character and fun stuff. Like you say, these verbal sparrings could have been much more interesting if he had him backed up with anything. And for me, just didn't.
I'm going to agree with you. Like, I think that had Andrew gone, well, it's not the way I've studied it is that he threw it at his feet and he didn't
far more intriguing.
Well, again, in the world of this film, I think that is supposed to be a true story. That they fudged a little bit for the script.
But this is supposed to be a real.
It's a realistic story.
Exactly. So they fudged. But here's the thing. My point is, he obviously, in my mind, Fletcher obviously fudges that to justify his teaching method,
right?
Not because that's what the real story is for the movie. I think that he says it that way to justify.
I took it as it's a fact of the film.
Yeah, definitely.
I didn't at all.
I say it because he said it twice. I say he does it to
he does it to justify.
He does it to justify. He even says, if I can get a Charlie Parker from beating people down, then I've done my job. And that's why he says that story twice in the movie. He says it once.
And how quick was it for you guys to figure out that it wasn't actually accurate?
Well, I had to look it up later.
I was looking up the story later.
I know it took all of 10 seconds.
Oh, yeah.
But again, though, I don't think that actually he might have been using that story to justify his own bullshit. I think it completely was, but that doesn't mean it wasn't true in the world of the movie. It's
I'm not saying that it wasn't.
How could it be poetic license? It's right there for everybody to know.
He was taking
it's a real fabrication of an actual event.
To me,
the only thing that I would say, and I don't know if this is accurate or not, it's just maybe playing a little bit of devil's advocate, is in the research that I did find the true story on, it was based off a statement that came out after the movie was made, where basically the movie happened, and then someone came out and went, actually, that's not exactly what happened.
What I heard, but okay, it's not what I read. Excuse me.
So it could read different than you. I do know that the article I read did say that someone came out and rebuttal to the film said this. So
I just don't buy the idea that it's too much of a cheat for me in a script to lay that thing there and knowing that it's not the real story. Let's just pretend. By the way, for this movie, we're gonna pretend that it happened this way. Well, it's just too much of a cheat.
Well, that was sort of kind of my issues with Dallas Buyers Club.
Right, I understand what you're saying.
So, but I do agree with you that I felt that it was a thing of motivation. It had nothing to do. I mean, again, he admits it, and he says, "Well, if he can throw a cymbal at his head, and then he goes, I could throw chairs, and I can say, I can insult people and use their race against them, and say all these nasty things."
Oh yeah, this movie.
I had a teacher throw markers, pens, and books. No chairs.
There was a teacher at my high school who threw a textbook at a kid's head. Got fired afterwards.
Oh, he didn't get fired at ours.
He got an award.
I guess our school was kind of a pussy school.
Yeah, we got
can't handle having textbooks thrown at their head.
It was mostly like pens, pens. But there was a couple like books and binders.
Yeah, no, I agree.
I just felt there was an incredible lack of creativity on Fletcher, the character side, to think that this is the only way to motivate people. And I don't care what his obsession is. I just think it shows an incredible lack of creativity. And for me, looking at it script-wise, I think that shows an incredible lack of creativity too, as well. Not to try to do more with that particular.
He definitely had some creative insults.
I sort of kind of and I sort of kind of go by the fact that some people are just mean.
Yeah.
Like they were just
fine.
mean. And again, like I again, the mean, whatever harshness that I endured, it wasn't to make me a better person. It was just because they were flat out mean. Now, again,
I agree, but that doesn't make for me. It doesn't make for an interesting movie. Okay, he's going to be mean. There's nothing new. You. But it's in the first 10 minutes. Let me finish my thought, please. Let me finish my thought. In the first 10 minutes, whatever first experience they have with each other. Oh, okay. Like when he's getting that information, then he uses it. You just go, okay, that's the rest of the movie. There's nothing more to see. Every time they get, he's going to manipulate, yell, berate, demean, all the other stuff. He's going to go at and show, oh yeah, watch this. And then it's like, okay, great, let's just get to the end.
But it's not that one-sided relationship. It's the way that him and Andrew are feeding off each other and playing with each other.
It's the same thing, same scene over and over. It's just, I'm going to yell and berate you.
If you look at it, at it from the point of one person's loss of humanity, which is essentially what happens to Andrew, to our hapless hero or protagonist, is that throughout the movie, like we see, and again, the way I looked at the movie is at the very beginning, he was like really hurt that he couldn't please this guy. But then we see him with his dad, and we see sort of kind of like a normal relationship. We see that he likes girls and that he's shy, okay? And that goes back to the band geek nerd kind of like, you know, and when he finally asked her out, I mean, he was having a great day. I mean, he just got accepted into this guy's orchestra to be an alternate, and then he goes and asks the girl out, and that was sort of kind of awkward, but she said yes. And he's like really happy. He's really proud of himself. And then we start to see that get stripped away, like beat by beat. No pun intended. And by the end of the movie, it's like, do we lament his loss of humanity? Are we happy for Andrew, or do we lament his loss of humanity?
For me,
I lamented his loss of humanity.
I did too.
For me, I was
did.
there to observe.
But I also think, and again, this is I'll say this one more time, and then I'll get off this point. Is that it seems to me it's much more interesting of a duel between the two as they're circling around each other. If he can really match him, if he went back and went, Charlie Parker, let me see, and he checks and he goes, you know, I checked that. And
but
so
again,
then he comes back. Let me finish my point. Thanks. Right. So and now you really got stuff happening, because then you have scenes that you don't know what's going to happen and who is really going to. And to not have that, it just kind of falls flat. It's like, who cares?
I'll keep saying that I think if the fictional Andrew Naiman used fictional Google in this fictional movie, he would see that Joe Jonas really did throw a symbol at Charlie Parker's head. Yeah,
I mean, I'm not gonna debate whether he threw it at his head or not. He just used it as a tool to justify his action.
That's what, but I mean, but if our lead calls that into question, then you've got something happening. You've got some stuff happening.
And I don't disagree with you, because in this world,
I don't care whether or not he finds the Pope. What bothered me was that there was never any pushback on any of it.
I think you have your facts wrong, sir.
And it doesn't even have to be about that. It has to just like, okay, you never.
I think this is just the world that was created. We can talk about the language, because that was another thing that was holding the movie back from being made.
The language?
Well, the language.
Well, the homophobic language and the racial slurs.
I'm just going to say the impolitically correctness of certain things. And
that was holding. Really, they had concerns about that.
Yeah. They said that it was over the top, but Damien fought for it. He's like,
really,
I'm not going to tone it down.
Goes, no, I thought you have to have that. I mean, the whole thing is dehumanizing, and that's the point of it.
Don't disagree, and that's
the Full Metal Jacket drill sergeant stuff.
Yep. And again, though, I think it's so weird. It's like when you watch it in a movie like Full Metal Jacket, it's the army. Like, these people have to be trained a certain way, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. But when you're talking
you break
about
people
music,
down to build them back up. That's what you do.
And
I don't know.
Back up necessarily.
Exactly. Like, there's none of that in this, because that's not who he is. You realize.
But we don't see it from a music side. We don't see that drill sergeant on the music side of things. And that's what I found very interesting about this movie. And I loved how it used jazz instead of rock and roll, because jazz can, like, yes, you can have soft rock, you can have heavy metal, thrash rock, punk rock, pop rock, whatever. But in jazz, again, jazz can be a miasma of different beats and collusion and coming together to make a music.
Right.
And it's a collaborative kind of thing. So I love that it was jazz. And I think the jazz is as much a character.
I completely agree.
The precision of that music, and also the precision of the editing throughout. Not just the sound editing, all the editing was fantastic. And,
couldn't agree with you more. And again, I do liken it to, again, my friend Peter Block said it was edited like an action movie, and when I thought about it, it was. I mean, when you go back to a symbol that has a ton of sweat, I mean, it was like a Tony Scott film, for crying out loud. The symbol was sweating with blood dripping down off it.
Again, and the
only thing that was missing was a ceiling fan.
I know.
Yeah.
And
the art of that drum solo and the whip pans, the close-ups and the Dutch angles, and it's so dynamically filmed.
And it was just like, again, the caravan, okay? And how they had to film that, and he had that all storyboarded out, and he had to have like, okay, Miles, we're gonna do measures of 16 to 18 right now. Okay, we have this, we have the music. Okay, so now we're gonna focus on the symbols. Oh wait, we need continuity because we have the audience out there. Collaborative effort, I think, goes into this movie.
Absolutely,
and it was done very quickly.
And
19 days.
19 days.
Do all these shots. It was.
And that's
crazy,
and that's why I said at the beginning of this, I wish the music the film held up to the music, because of the way that jazz and the intercut and all that, which seems complex to me, was mirrored in their relationship. I didn't find it complex.
Interesting, which I did. I mean, I was like you, but I did. It was like it was an action film, sports film. Like I was on the edge of my seat. Who's gonna win? And then I was just like, oh my god!
I knew.
You
didn't know what was gonna happen all along, because he's not going away. When the whole thing is set up. Hey, come join me at the end. I mean,
I found it pretty legitimately unpredictable throughout.
Yeah, coming down the street.
I knew that he was gonna. What I didn't foresee, I thought we were gonna leave it off on the fuck you, throw the sticks.
Yeah,
I am good, damn it.
Right.
And then a couple of weeks later, get a letter from Blue Note saying, hey, we want to sign you. Like something like that. Like to me, that would be
that's wrapped up a little too.
I know.
That's what you're saying is what you thought it might happen.
I thought that, but instead we don't. I mean, maybe he gets that job with Blue Note, and then he's just a complete asshole to everybody. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it was an interesting way to end a movie, and I have to say, like, I almost feel like we're back in the 70s again, because the most recent rash of movies that have been coming out, things like Gone Girl, and we're going to talk Nightcrawler and things, but the endings have been not the best. Like, they're not knee-slapping, happy endings, so to speak.
Oh. And I think...
Go ahead.
And I think jumping on to that, that's what kept it unpredictable for me, was because as soon as what I recognized in their relationship is that there was nothing that was kind of off limits on how far to push someone. And it did get addressed with the car accident, but like you didn't know the result of it. And when they introduced also like the suicide, the death of his other student, but we didn't know it was a suicide at first. We just knew it was a death.
We learned that later.
Like, that to me was like, what is this saying? Like, how far can he actually push him? And is it going to be far enough that he becomes the next Bird and is able to do something genius? Or is it going to be so far that he also goes down that same path and one of them or someone ends up dead or something very worse than bloodied hands and blisters?
Yeah, he was gonna die. He was gonna stroke out and was playing drums.
That's what kept part of me so anxious the whole time, because I couldn't find the limits on what he was willing to take and what Fletcher's willing to put him through.
Yeah, anything could. For all we know, like Andrew might have murdered Fletcher by the end of the movie. There's that level of intensity.
Or like broken the other drummer's hands.
Yeah.
Or some I didn't know if it was going to get that extreme.
See, I never thought of the movie that way.
I didn't either.
I never thought of the movie. I did.
No.
I thought it could. I just thought it had the potential to go either way, where it's like he's either going to succeed at some point and be talented and like show some grand performance, or he's going to fail, and he's going to fail while pushing himself too hard.
And the failure aspect was coming up. I mean, because he's out of the class and whatnot, and he's taken to being a barista somewhere or whatever.
Right.
Now, here's an interesting question, and this the same gentleman that made the action analogy, Peter Block, brought this up. So he calls Nicole up towards you know, when he's out of school and whatever.
Which doesn't make any sense to me. But
yeah, I don't know how that.
Why he called her?
Why? Well,
he was regretful about what happened.
Why?
No,
but the way you guys described him, he wouldn't have regret in his arsenal of emotions.
I could.
What's that?
It was.
Just out of experience, there's a couple voicemails that I've gotten that are very interesting and very
It
random.
made no sense to me whatsoever.
It was a bold call to make, but here's the question that was posed, because he invites her to the Lincoln Center. And she says, I'll have to check with my boyfriend. Did she really have a boyfriend, or did she not have a boyfriend?
Yes, she does. Because his Miles Teller's roommate was supposed to play him in a scene. Just throwing that out there.
I don't know.
But
don't care.
but not knowing that it's totally possible she could have been lying just based on what's in the script.
I'm not talking about in the scripts his roommate. I'm talking about his, I believe, actual roommate.
Oh, I know what you mean.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just checking.
That thing implied, but just based on what's in the film, she could have been lying about it.
She could have been. Yeah, I mean, it was just an interesting question. I just thought I'd throw that matzo ball on the table here and see what we all thought.
But look, at the end of the film, Fletcher never gets his comeuppance. Fletcher gets a victory. He gets a win. He finds the incredibly talented student he's been looking for. And I think that's what makes this interesting, is there's ambiguity here, and you can walk out of the movie and I think people will have different reactions, whether Fletcher's methods were right in this particular case or whether he's just a monster.
No, and I agree with you. And J.K. Simmons has said, he says one of the things that really intrigued him about this movie, and after watching it, was the ambiguity and how it can be divisive, and a good movie can spark this kind of a conversation.
Yes, and it should.
And it makes it fun for us, I think. And when we talk about these sort of kind of things, but we should talk a little bit too. I mean, listen, this movie came out October 10th. Opened up extremely limited. It played on like six locations, and it opened up at number 34 at the box office, and it did 135K on its opening weekend in just 34 locations. Somebody do the math quickly. I think that's 22,000
Don't ask me to do
or something. I don't know.
Respectable.
But I mean, thus far, I mean, right now, I believe it's in 88 locations across the country. I know it opens wider this upcoming week, I believe the 14th. To date, it's about 1.6 million total gross world. And so, which is not too bad for a movie that's only at 88 locations. And we've got... the movie's about $3 million to make, 3.3 million.
And they're obviously not spending a lot on advertising, since I haven't seen any advertising except for people who are either critics or fans, and they're the ones posting about it.
It's the slow roll, because it's going to be in theaters for a while, and it's going to get the Oscar push. I mean, Simmons is a lock for a nomination, if nothing else.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with that. I mean, I had learned about this, again, from the same guy. I had heard about it because there was a lot of buzz coming out of Sundance about this movie. As far as the TV ads, you're right. But unlike John, I do enjoy watching trailers. And trailers and footage have been online. They've been building to this, and the buzz has been building as well. It's currently at 97% on Rotten Tomatoes. No cinema score as of yet, because it's just not wide enough to start polling the audiences coming out. But the critics are loving this. J.K. Simmons, I think this elevates.
Puts him on a whole nother level.
Yeah, but and again, we talked before. I think Miles Teller is getting, in a sense, shortchanged. I'm not blaming J.K. Simmons. I'm not.
I don't think Miles Teller's getting shortchanged. I think so many people are talking about him, and on the heels
regarding, elaborate on that. We're talking about him how?
As he's an indie darling who's also coming out in blockbusters, whether it's a lot of this talk is in conjunction with talking about Shailene Woodley, how they did Spectacular Now, and then talking about Divergent, how he's coming out with this.
Oh, sure, he's a star on the rise, for sure.
No, but that'll happen after Fantastic Four. I'm not hearing. I'm hearing whenever especially doing research on this movie, it was J.K. Simmons.
Because we haven't seen anything. Well, honestly, I don't think Miles did much that we haven't seen.
The people I'm talking about.
No, I'm just saying. I didn't say he didn't do a good job. I thought he did a good job. I'm just saying we haven't seen J.K. Simmons do anything like this, and that's the character.
Jonah Jameson, Spider-Man.
Or you could go all the way back to Oz. He was terrifying in that.
I'm going to talk about just the fact that I think the people who I've heard talking about it, which is a lot of people who are, I guess, my age group, right out of college, or kind of into like the new the same age bracket. They're talking about Miles. They're talking about who to look out for, who's around our ages.
But I'm not seeing him. I'm not seeing him being talked about in Entertainment Weekly as much.
No. Most of the reviews, most of the reviews I've seen from this have been like, Simmons is obviously amazing, but we also have to point out how good Teller is. Right. He's getting kind of second shrift.
Yeah. But that's because we know Jacob. I'm not saying he didn't do a great job in Oz, but right now you just said it earlier in the thing. He's the insurance guy. He's the that's how we know of him now. He played the blind guy in that sitcom. We were not in the zeitgeist right now. Wow, where did this guy come from? Because we didn't. That's why it's not that he hasn't done great work.
Where he came
of
from.
course,
just knowing
he's been around forever.
No, I'm saying that that's good for us.
And just knowing Hollywood politics, I think he's just a really beloved guy in Hollywood, and he's been a character actor who's been working for a long time. I think for a lot of people,
sentimental favorite.
Yeah, for sure, a sentimental favorite.
Because he'll be my friend. But I think Miles did a fine job. I just don't think he did anything groundbreaking. And there was a couple some really obvious choices as an actor. I was like, they even had the trite thing about touching feet under the table. I was like, oh boy, okay.
You can't blame him for that.
I'm not blaming him for that. I'm just giving that's the kind of flavor I got on some of his performances, especially with her. It was like it was obvious and nothing really.
I thought he was great. I mean, I thought what he poured into this movie. It was
a lot of blood and sweat.
A lot of blood, sweat, and tears, saliva. I also felt like, again, I was a huge fan. I was a huge fan of Spectacular Now. And actually, one of my proudest things was that I was able to tell Shailene Woodley about how amazing I thought that movie was and how it portrayed alcoholism amongst teens, and that her and Miles Teller, I thought he was fantastic in that movie. This movie may not
I'll give
have
him
given
Spectacular
him as much.
Now. I won't give him Divergent.
Well, I'm not gonna. Yeah, but again, I can't fault the guy for taking the. I can't fault the guy for taking those kind of roles. He was talking about how he was in a in one of his classes. I guess Joe Pantaleone came in, and the question Joey Pants, and he was asked like, so how do you pick your movies? Where do you get your movies? And the advice was, do 3 movies a year. You do 1 for the money, 1 for the location, and 1 for the artistic thing. And
if you can get 3 movies,
if you can get 3, and but I think somebody like Miles Teller and Shailene Woodley, I think that they are.
He'll be fine. He has his cred now,
and he's going to be in Fantastic Four. Yeah. Although it remains to be seen how they'll do. But
who's he supposed to be in Fantastic Four?
I think. Don't quote me. Pardon me, Marvel comic book fans, but I believe he's Steve Richards. Who's I thought. Oh, that's right.
Mr. Fantastic.
That's right. He is Mr. Fantastic.
So this is like a young Fantastic Four.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Not a bad move.
That's right, because they changed ethnicity on the Human Torch. That's right. So
cool.
Okay.
So I mean. Yeah, they're doing a whole reboot, but this is that that could be his Hunger Games. I don't fault Jennifer Lawrence for taking Hunger Games, but when you watch her in her other movies, she's so above Hunger Games. Like, I get it, she's making a ton of money off of making those movies. She's good at it.
You gotta do both. If Jennifer Lawrence just kept doing Winter's Bone, she wouldn't be the star
but she
is.
did Silver Linings Playbook and American House. I mean, she's a great actress.
Yeah.
She just she was very lucky with Hunger Games, and I don't fault her for taking it. But after watching those other movies, I always look at her and say, God, she's so above. Yeah. What?
And I think she's a very good Mystique in the X-Men movies.
True. Thank you. I said, I forgot about that too.
All right, whatever we covered, yeah.
Absolutely.
We've done music. We've done how this came about. We've done our acting. We've done our scenes.
Well, we haven't really talked about the director. We like this.
Damien.
Oh, yeah, Damien
Chazelle.
Chazelle.
Editing.
Did you like his direction?
Yeah, I mean, I liked the movie actually, despite my misgivings about it. I didn't get nervous or antsy or edgy or I wasn't uncomfortable with it. Maybe it's because Did you
have really good teachers?
Hell no. Oh. I'm much older than you. I had horror. That kind of experience was not unusual for me, so it wasn't making me antsy at all.
Yeah.
It's weird that Chazelle was a jazz drummer in high school who based this off his own abusive relationship with a teacher. And also that his other feature, Grand Piano, was also kind of an action movie with musical elements.
Yeah, and he said as bad as that teacher was, nowhere near to what he had Fletcher doing.
Oh, sure.
And such. So, the other great thing we didn't really talk about regarding Miles Teller is that he's been playing drums for 15 years. Or since he was 15 years old.
Yeah.
Thank you. And a lot of what we see on screen is actually him drumming.
Yeah.
And there are a few shots that some overheads and close-ups of the hands, but even Miles Teller and Damien say, you can cheat drumming. You can,
Because honestly, I don't know anything about the drums. If I would, okay, he's drumming. It worked for me, even though I don't know how accurate it was or not.
I think that's incredibly impressive.
Yeah, and like it was funny because we talked about that on Should I Stay with Chloe Moritz and the way that it was edited, but they actually digitized.
They cut from her face to her hands.
No, they digitized her head onto her body.
Oh, did they really? Oh, nice.
Yeah,
nice.
Yeah.
You could tell.
Oh, you can.
Yeah, they digitized.
That's interesting.
But with Miles Teller, again, whatever experience, and again, Damien says, look, he's not the best drummer on the planet. He goes, but you could work with him, and I just found it very fascinating that, especially Caravan at the end. That was all they had, that session drummers do that solo. And he said, he was able to fake it in the shots and angles that I used. And every now and then every now and then it was obvious when they weren't showing his face, whether it was an overhead shot, if you do a close-up of the hands.
Sure.
But for the most part, they
edited it nicely. I mean, it's,
he's got an amazing facility for filming music. I would love to see what he would do with a film that's not about music.
I'd like to see him do an action movie.
Yes. Oh, yeah. I mean, it does seem like this is so close to his autobiographical experience. I'd like to see him branch outside of that a little bit before we can judge him as a director fully.
Yeah. But he did a good job.
He did do a really good job with this.
I thought. Script writing, we know that there are issues, but the movie looked good.
No, it looked great. I thought it was wonderful.
Did you know that most of it was shot in Los Angeles?
I had no idea.
Yeah, most of it was shot in Los Angeles. It was they got a better tax break.
Oh, really?
And plus, everybody was here.
Finally,
people involved in the production.
So that's how they could make it.
LA
so it was LA for New York shooting, but they did go to New York to film some exteriors. I thought the whole movie was filmed in New York. So they did a good job.
Yeah, they did.
Nice
good
little
production
magic.
Design. Way to go!
Right
Way to go, art director.
Yeah,
movie magic.
Absolutely. I like that. So
awesome. I feel like we can go to our overall impressions.
Yeah. Please do. And since you opened it up.
All right, my overall impressions of this movie. I think it was really well made. I loved the focus on the jazz. I thought that everything was very strong, and it was just an interesting chunk of life that I was very happy to watch but not be a part of. Yeah, that's how I feel.
And I feel that this right now, like, as I said at the top, in my top three, I really like its kineticism, its energy that it had. I really liked. The performances were fantastic. I do urge people, get the soundtrack. I mean, I've been,
even if you're not a fan, believe me, because I don't know jazz at all, but I think you'll enjoy that just for the music alone. I think you'll enjoy it.
When I watched this earlier in the week, it was a crowded theater. There was a couple sitting right behind us, and when the movie was over, the female part of the couple, she was like, "First thing I'm doing is going on iTunes right now, and I'm getting the soundtrack." Yeah. And listen, I think I'm hoping that maybe it opens up, like you said, wow, this is amazing. I'm not even into jazz, and I really like this. Yeah. So,
did the showing you were at, did the crowd applaud after the final cut to black?
Nope.
They did at mine.
I did. There were very few people clapping. Like, I was the only, like, when he said, "Fuck you," I was like, yeah. I was like, and nobody else was. And then it cut to black.
I actually had a few people leaving before Fade to Black.
Oh, wow.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
This is... Yeah.
I just want to say, in my theater, I saw a sold-out screening ArcLight, and they applause erupted as soon as the credits came.
Same here. It was like
Josh,
insane
the engineer,
applause.
and Josh Richmond had the same experience. Did you go to the same theater?
It was actually at ArcLight.
They're actually the same person.
We are.
Just can't
There's one
tell.
Josh.
I'm engineering at the same time.
I'll chalk that up to it being an ArcLight crowd.
Might have responded to it differently, but I thought this was such a crowd-pleasing movie, just the way it was structured, and that was a perfect, like, we don't need to show the applause after the performance. We'll just cut and we'll let the audience applaud in our place. Although maybe it didn't work at your screenings.
Yeah, we must have had a different movie because I actually heard people as we were leaving going, well, that happened. So they didn't. Wow. So the idea that it just wasn't the same movie.
Yeah,
experience.
I didn't get that, and I saw this at the Landmark. I saw it at the Landmark. Saw it during the week, and it was I wouldn't say it was sold out, but it was pretty full. I didn't get that reaction.
I know. I thought, wow, what did he see? Because I didn't think that. But you know, you never know. I mean,
interesting.
This is one of the best movies I've seen so far this year. It's battling out with Boyhood currently for a top spot. It is so kinetic and it's so precise, and both of the central performances and the way they're playing off of each other. I was thrilled and I was totally hooked from start to finish. Highly recommended.
I enjoyed the movie. I think the music is great in it. Go for it just for that. I have my misgivings about the story and structure. Very thin plot, not a lot of character development for me, and I tend to like those more.
So, and we also throw out a big thanks to Ben Wilkins.
Absolutely.
Craig, man, thank you so much for coming on the show. Oh, Ben, in answer to your question, he texted me. I thought this was funny. He's like, was that Maria Menounos talking?
No.
We have Sara Stretton. No. It was as beautiful and wonderful and very nice. And we love Maria for producing this.
Absolutely.
So she's with you. She's with us in spirit, Ben. Thank you very much for coming on the show with us.
Quickly, let them know where they can find you.
Who are you pointing to?
You.
Me?
You. Yes, young lady.
Oh, you can find me here at Anatomy of a Movie.
There you go.
Or on Box Office Breakdown with Schmoes No podcast. And sometimes I'm on AfterBuzz TV too.
There you go.
There you
go. Here at Anatomy of a Movie and at DMovies1701 on Twitter.
Ciao.
Guys, follow me at Radio TFB on Twitter. You can also check out my Coen Brothers themed movie podcast at acceptthemystery.net. You can check out other stuff I do at joshrichmond.net. And I'm engineering a whole bunch of shows at AfterBuzz TV.
He has a lot of places you can find him.
I sure do.
You can't find me anywhere but here. So tune in next time when we can bring you another Anatomy of a Movie. We'll talk to you next time.
Thanks all.
From producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the rest of the Anatomy of a Movie staff, we would like to thank you for listening and subscribing to the show. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to email or tweet us. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been Anatomy of a Movie.